The morning sun streamed through the lace curtains of Emily's childhood bedroom, casting delicate patterns on the floor. The air buzzed with excitement, filled with the soft hum of distant conversations and the occasional burst of laughter from the guests outside. Today was her wedding day, the day she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. Emily stood before the antique mirror, her reflection framed by the ivory gown she had chosen months ago. It fit perfectly, hugging her figure in all the right places. A veil hung loosely over her shoulders, its delicate lace brushing the small of her back. "It's finally happening," she whispered to herself, a smile tugging at her lips. On the bed, Buddy, her golden retriever, watched her intently. His tail wagged softly against the quilt, but there was a restlessness in his amber eyes that Emily couldn't quite place. "You're a bundle of nerves too, huh?" she said, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. Buddy leaned into her touch but let out a low whine, his gaze shifting to the small box of jewelry on the dresser. Emily followed his eyes and chuckled. "What's with you today? It's just Nana's necklace. You've seen it 100 times. Buddy's ears perked up as she opened the box, revealing the delicate pearl necklace her grandmother had worn on her own wedding day. It was a family heirloom, passed down through generations, and Emily had always planned to wear it when her time came. She held the necklace up to the light, admiring how it caught the sun's rays. But Buddy growled softly, a sound so uncharacteristic that Emily froze. "Buddy, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Buddy jumped off the bed, pacing the room as though agitated. He stopped near the door, blocking it with his body, and looked back at her, whining again. Emily shook her head, trying to dismiss the unease creeping into her thoughts. "You're probably just picking up on all the excitement," she said, slipping the necklace around her neck. She stood and smoothed her dress, taking one last look in the mirror. The necklace glimmered against her collarbone, a perfect complement to her gown. "Come on, Buddy," she said, gesturing for him to follow. "It's showtime." But Buddy didn't budge. He stayed by the door, his body rigid and his eyes fixed on her. Downstairs, the sounds of the bustling household grew louder. Her mother's voice carried over the commotion. "Emily, sweetheart, we're ready when you are." Emily sighed and knelt beside Buddy. "I don't have time for this, boy. You can't block me in here forever." She tried to coax him away from the door, but he remained firm, his growl deepening. For the first time, Emily felt a flicker of doubt. "Buddy," she said softly, her hand resting on his head. "What is it? Are you trying to tell me something?" Buddy's ears twitched and he nudged her hand with his nose, his eyes filled with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Finally, Emily managed to guide him away from the door. She opened it and stepped into the hallway, the sound of laughter and music growing louder. Buddy followed closely, his tail low, his body tense. The hallway was lined with photos of Emily's family, each frame holding a memory frozen in time. Buddy stopped in front of one particular photo, a black and white image of Emily's grandmother on her wedding day, wearing the same necklace that now adorned Emily's neck. "Are you remembering Nana?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Buddy barked once, a sharp, almost urgent sound. The stairs creaked under her heels as she descended, Buddy close on her heels. When they reached the main floor, a wave of warmth and energy enveloped them. Guests milled about, their voices blending into a cheerful hum. Emily's bridesmaids rushed to her side, adjusting her veil and handing her the bouquet of white roses. "You look stunning," one of them gushed, but Emily barely heard them. Her mind was on Buddy, who had stopped at the edge of the crowd, his gaze fixed on her. The doors to the garden opened, revealing the aisle lined with blooming flowers and rows of smiling guests. At the far end, Alex stood waiting, his eyes lighting up as he saw Emily. Her heart swelled at the sight of him, but just as she took her first step forward, Buddy darted in front of her, blocking her path. The crowd gasped, and Emily froze, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Buddy, no!" she whispered through clenched teeth, trying to nudge him aside with her foot. But Buddy didn't move. He stood firm, his eyes locked on hers, his body a wall between her and the aisle. "Is he supposed to be part of the ceremony?" someone whispered. "Maybe he's just nervous," another guest suggested, laughing nervously. Alex tilted his head, a puzzled smile on his face. "What's going on?" he called out, his voice light-hearted but curious. I don't know," Emily replied, her voice faltering. Buddy barked again, a low, insistent sound that echoed in the silent garden. He looked back at Emily, then toward the side of the house, as if trying to lead her somewhere. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, but Emily couldn't tear her eyes away from Buddy. Her heart raced as she crouched down, her veil pooling around her feet. "Buddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you trying to tell me?" Buddy nudged her hand, then pulled gently at the hem of her dress, his eyes full of urgency. For a moment, Emily hesitated. The rational part of her wanted to dismiss his behavior as nerves, but a deeper part of her, the part that had always trusted Buddy's instincts, told her to follow him. Taking a deep breath, she rose to her feet. "I'll be right back," she called to the guests, her cheeks burning under their confused stares. Buddy wagged his tail once and began to lead her away from the crowd. Buddy trotted ahead, his golden fur catching the sunlight as he led Emily toward the back of the house. The hum of the crowd faded behind them, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. "Buddy, where are we going?" Emily asked, clutching the hem of her dress to avoid tripping. The golden retriever didn't glance back. His focus was entirely on the path ahead, his movements deliberate and urgent. Emily's heart pounded as they reached the edge of the property, where a small garden bordered the woods. This had been her grandmother's favorite spot, a place of quiet beauty where she would sit for hours, lost in thought. Buddy stopped near a patch of overgrown flowers and began to paw at the ground. He barked once, then looked up at Emily expectantly. Emily hesitated, glancing back toward the house. The murmur of the guests was faint now, barely audible through the trees. "What is it, boy?" she asked, kneeling beside him. Buddy continued to dig, his claws kicking up dirt and revealing something buried beneath the soil. Emily's fingers brushed against something hard, and she carefully unearthed a small, weathered box. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized it. The box had belonged to her grandmother, a keepsake that had been missing for years. "How did you know this was here?" Emily whispered, her eyes wide as she looked at Buddy. The dog barked softly, his tail wagging as if to say, "Open it." Emily sat back on her heels and examined the box. The wood was scratched and worn, but the latch was still intact. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers trembling, before flipping it open. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, and a locket she hadn't seen since her grandmother's passing. Emily's hands shook as she unfolded the paper, revealing a letter written in her grandmother's familiar handwriting. The letter. "Dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means Buddy has done his job well. I always knew he had a special sense for what truly matters. Today, you stand on the edge of a new life, and I want to remind you of something important. Trust your heart. Love is not about perfection. It's about choosing someone, flaws and all, and building something beautiful together. This locket holds a photo of your grandfather and me on our wedding day, a reminder of the love that carried us through every storm. I hope it inspires you as you begin your journey. With all my love." Nana tears blurred Emily's vision as she finished reading. She opened the locket, revealing a tiny black and white photo of her grandparents on their wedding day. She glanced at Buddy, who sat patiently by her side, his eyes warm and knowing. "You knew this was here," she murmured. "How did you know?" Buddy wagged his tail, his gaze never leaving hers. Emily's mind raced as she clutched the letter and locket to her chest. Memories of her grandmother flooded back, her warm smile, her gentle words of wisdom, and the way she had always encouraged Emily to follow her heart. But with those memories came doubts. Was she truly ready for this step? Was her love for Alex strong enough to face the challenges ahead? Buddy nudged her hand with his nose, as if sensing her inner turmoil. Okay, Emily said, rising to her feet. "Let's go back." She slipped the locket around her neck, letting it rest alongside the pearl necklace she was already wearing. The weight of the two pieces felt comforting, as though her grandmother's presence was guiding her. When Emily returned to the ceremony, the guests turned to her with a mix of curiosity and concern. Alex stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Em, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Emily hesitated, clutching the letter tightly in her hand. She glanced at Buddy, who stood at her side, his tail wagging slightly. She began, her voice faltering. "I needed a moment to clear my head." Alex's expression softened, and he reached for her hand. "It's okay," he said. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Emily looked into his eyes, searching for the reassurance she needed. She saw love there, but also a vulnerability that mirrored her own. "Alex," she said quietly, her voice trembling, "before we go any further, I need to talk to you alone." The crowd murmured as Emily and Alex stepped away from the altar, Buddy following closely behind. They stopped near a bench under a willow tree, the quiet hum of nature providing a moment of solace. Emily handed Alex the letter, her hands trembling. "This was my grandmother's," she said. "Buddy led me to it." Alex took the letter, his brow furrowing as he read. When he finished, he looked up at Emily, his eyes filled with emotion. "She was right," he said, "about everything." For the first time, Emily felt the weight of her doubts lifting. She and Alex talked openly, sharing their fears and hopes for the future. Buddy sat between them, his head resting on Emily's knee as though offering silent support. By the time they returned to the altar, the tension had dissipated. Emily held her head high, her heart steadied by the clarity their conversation had brought. Buddy walked proudly beside her, his tail wagging as if to signal that his work was far from over. The guests at the wedding murmured softly among themselves, their gazes shifting between the altar and the path Emily and Alex had taken moments earlier. The golden retriever, Buddy, had become the center of attention. His unwavering presence, a clear sign that something unusual was unfolding. Near the bench under the willow tree, Emily sat beside Alex, her hands tightly clutching the locket and letter. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before turning to face him. "Alex," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to be honest with you. Buddy's been acting strange all day, and when he led me to that box, it felt like my grandmother was trying to tell me something." Alex tilted his head slightly, concern flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Emily unfolded the letter once more, smoothing the creases with her fingers. "This," she said, holding it up, "is a letter my grandmother wrote before she passed away. She left it for me to find. Today, of all days, she wanted me to trust my heart and be sure of the life I'm choosing." Alex nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the ground. "And are you sure?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken until now. Emily felt the weight of it pressing on her chest. "I think," she said carefully, "I've been so focused on the idea of what this day is supposed to be that I haven't taken enough time to really think about us, about what happens after today." Alex leaned back against the bench, his expression a mixture of understanding and sadness. "Emily, I love you, but if you're not ready, if you need more time..." Emily looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. "That's the thing. I do love you, Alex, but I think I've been afraid of what it means to make this kind of commitment, to promise forever when I don't know what the future holds." Buddy, sensing her distress, placed his head on her lap, his warm eyes locking onto hers. He wagged his tail softly, a silent reminder of his presence. "Your grandmother's advice makes sense," Alex said, his voice gentle. "Marriage isn't about perfection, it's about choosing each other every day, no matter what comes our way." Emily's heart swelled at his words. She wiped away a tear, the edges of her doubt beginning to soften. "I want to choose you, Alex, but I need to know that we're both walking into this with open eyes." Alex reached for her hand, his grip firm but reassuring. "Then let's start today by being honest. No pretenses, no expectations, just us." With Buddy leading the way, they returned to the altar. The guests watched in silence as Emily and Alex walked hand in hand, their faces marked by a newfound clarity. At the front of the crowd, Emily paused and turned to address everyone. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "This isn't the day I imagined, but it's become something even more meaningful. I've learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about trust, vulnerability, and choosing to grow together." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers carrying across the garden. Emily smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. She turned to Alex, her heart full as she met his gaze. "Shall we try this again?" she asked, her lips curving into a playful smile. Alex laughed, squeezing her hand. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As the ceremony resumed, Buddy took his place at Emily's side, a golden beacon of loyalty and love. The officiant's words carried a deeper resonance now, each vow spoken with purpose and conviction. When the time came to exchange rings, Buddy barked softly, earning laughter from the guests. Emily glanced down at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You're the real hero today," she whispered, her voice barely audible. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the reception area. Laughter and music filled the air as guests shared stories and danced under twinkling lights. Buddy, ever the loyal companion, received his fair share of attention. Children flocked to him, petting his golden fur and feeding him scraps of food. Emily watched from a distance, her heart full as she saw how much joy he brought to everyone around him. Later that evening, as the festivities began to wind down, Emily found herself standing at the edge of the garden. The night was cool, the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. Buddy trotted over to her, his tail wagging gently. He sat beside her, leaning into her leg as she scratched behind his ears. "You've always known what I needed, haven't you?" she asked softly. Buddy looked up at her, his amber eyes filled with a wisdom that words could never convey. Alex joined them a moment later, slipping his arm around Emily's shoulders. "He's some dog," he said, glancing down at Buddy. "He's family," Emily replied, her voice warm. They stood in silence for a while, watching as the stars began to emerge in the night sky. The day had been anything but ordinary, but as Emily leaned into Alex and felt Buddy's presence at her side, she realized it had turned into something far more meaningful. The golden hour bathed the garden in a warm glow, casting long shadows across the neatly arranged rows of chairs. Guests had settled back into their seats, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Emily and Alex stood together at the altar, their hands clasped tightly. Buddy sat at Emily's side, his golden fur gleaming in the sunlight. The atmosphere felt different now, more grounded, more personal. The officiant smiled warmly, sensing the shift in the couple's energy. "Marriage," he began, "isn't just about the perfect day or the grand gestures. It's about two people choosing each other every single day, no matter the challenges they face." As the words washed over her, Emily felt a profound sense of clarity. She glanced at Alex, whose smile mirrored her own, and then down at Buddy, who wagged his tail as if affirming everything that had been said. The officiant continued, "Emily and Alex have chosen to honor not only their love for each other, but also the legacies that have shaped them into the people they are today." At that moment, Buddy rose to his feet, his nose twitching as he focused on something nearby. The crowd murmured softly as the dog padded toward the edge of the altar, where a small table held a few carefully arranged items. Buddy stopped in front of the table, his tail wagging with purpose. Emily followed his gaze and realized what had captured his attention. The locket and letter her grandmother had left her, now placed prominently beside a bouquet of flowers. With gentle hands, Emily picked up the locket, its delicate chain glinting in the fading light. She turned to Alex, her heart swelling with emotion. "This," she said, her voice steady but filled with feeling, "belonged to my grandmother. She left it for me to find today, and it's reminded me of what truly matters: trust, love, and the courage to choose each other, flaws and all." Alex reached for her hand, his eyes brimming with emotion. "Your grandmother sounds like an incredible woman," he said softly. "She was," Emily replied, fastening the locket around her neck alongside the pearl necklace. "And I think she'd be happy to know we're starting this journey together with her blessings." Buddy barked once, drawing a ripple of laughter from the guests. The tension of the earlier interruptions had completely dissolved, replaced by warmth and joy. The ceremony resumed, each moment imbued with a newfound depth. When the time came to exchange rings, the officiant paused and turned to the guests. "As Emily and Alex prepare to share their vows, they've asked for a small addition to this ceremony, a moment to honor the family and friends who have brought them to this point." Buddy wagged his tail and stepped forward, drawing another round of laughter and applause. He carried a small velvet pouch in his mouth, the fabric swaying gently as he approached the couple. Emily crouched down to take the pouch, her smile widening. "Thank you, Buddy," she whispered, scratching behind his ears. Inside the pouch were the wedding rings, their polished surfaces gleaming in the light. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. The rings represented not only their love, but also the unwavering loyalty and guidance that had brought them here. As Emily and Alex exchanged vows, the garden seemed to hold its breath. Each word felt intentional, spoken not just to each other but to the family and friends who bore witness to their commitment. "I promise," Alex said, his voice steady, "to choose you every day, to celebrate our joys, weather our storms, and always honor the love that brought us here." Emily's voice trembled slightly as she replied, "I promise to trust you, to stand by you, and to build a life together that's rooted in love and understanding." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted into cheers. Buddy barked joyfully, his tail wagging furiously as Alex and Emily shared their first kiss as a married couple. As the applause continued, Emily turned to Buddy and knelt down. "You're part of this too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She wrapped her arms around him, her white gown pooling on the ground. The photographers captured the moment, a bride, her loyal golden retriever, and the love that tied them all together. The reception that followed was a lively affair, filled with laughter, music, and heartfelt toasts. Buddy became the unofficial guest of honor, receiving pets and treats from nearly everyone in attendance. During her toast, Emily's maid of honor recounted the day's events, bringing both laughter and tears to the crowd. "I think we can all agree," she said, raising her glass, "that Buddy is the true MVP of this wedding." The guests erupted into cheers, clinking their glasses as Buddy barked in response. As the night wore on, Emily found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Sitting on a quiet bench under the stars, she held the locket in her hand, its weight both comforting and profound. Alex joined her, his arms slipping around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Just how lucky I am," Emily replied, leaning into him. "To have had Nana, to have Buddy, and now to have you." The sounds of laughter and music drifted in the background as they sat together, savoring the peace of the moment. Buddy lay at their feet, his golden fur glowing softly in the moonlight. "Your grandmother would be proud," Alex said after a while, "of the woman you've become and the life we're building together." Emily smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I think so too." The chapter ends with a scene of unity. Emily, Alex, and Buddy sharing a quiet dance under the stars, surrounded by the love and support of everyone who mattered most. The days following the wedding were a blur of joy and quiet reflection. Emily and Alex decided to stay a few extra days at the family estate, savoring the calm after the whirlwind of emotions that had marked their ceremony. The morning after, Emily stood in the kitchen, the sunlight pouring through the large windows as she prepared coffee. Buddy sat nearby, his head resting on his paws, his amber eyes following her every move. "You really outdid yourself yesterday," Emily said with a chuckle, glancing at him. "Saving the day and making me cry in front of everyone. Impressive work." Buddy wagged his tail softly, his ears perking up at the sound of her voice. Alex entered the room still in his pajamas, his hair tousled from sleep. He kissed Emily on the cheek before crouching down to scratch Buddy behind the ears. "You're a hero. You know that," Alex said, his tone light but sincere. "I think half the guests wanted to take you home with them." Buddy barked once, his tail thumping against the floor. Later that day, Emily and Alex decided to take a walk through the woods surrounding the estate. The crisp autumn air was filled with the scent of pine and earth, and the leaves crunched under their feet as they strolled along a familiar path. Buddy trotted ahead, his golden coat blending with the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. He seemed at ease, his earlier urgency replaced by a calm contentment. "This place feels different now," Emily said, her voice thoughtful. "Like it holds more meaning than before." Alex nodded, his gaze following Buddy. "It's not just the place, it's what happened here. It's what we've learned about ourselves." They reached the clearing where Buddy had led Emily the day before. The spot where she had found her grandmother's letter was marked by a small patch of freshly turned earth, the box buried once more as a symbol of closure. Emily knelt down, her fingers brushing against the soil. "She always knew how to guide me, even when she wasn't here," she murmured. Alex placed a hand on her shoulder. "And now Buddy's carrying on that legacy." As the weeks turned into months, life settled into a comfortable rhythm for Emily, Alex, and Buddy. The newlyweds moved into their own home, a cozy cottage on the outskirts of town, with a large yard where Buddy could roam freely. Their bond with Buddy deepened with each passing day. He became more than just a pet. He was a constant reminder of the love and guidance that had shaped their lives. One evening, as they sat together by the fireplace, Emily began flipping through a scrapbook she had started after the wedding. It was filled with photos and mementos, each page capturing a moment from their special day. She paused on a picture of Buddy standing proudly at the altar, the velvet pouch in his mouth. "We should frame this one," Emily said, smiling. "It's my favorite." Alex leaned over to look, his arm draped around her shoulders. "He looks so dignified," he said with a laugh, "like he knew exactly what he was doing." Buddy, lying at their feet, perked up at the sound of their laughter. He wagged his tail, his eyes flicking between Emily and Alex. "You did know, didn't you?" Emily said, leaning down to scratch his head. "You've always known what we needed, even when we didn't." Buddy barked softly, his tail wagging in agreement. As their story spread through their community, people began to see Buddy as more than just a dog. He became a symbol of loyalty and intuition, inspiring others to cherish the bonds they shared with their own pets. Neighbors would stop by to meet him, bringing treats and sharing their own stories of how their animals had impacted their lives. "He has a way of bringing people together," Emily said one afternoon, watching as a group of children played with Buddy in the yard. Alex nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "He's teaching us all something about love and trust." One particularly crisp morning, Emily decided to revisit the clearing in the woods, this time with a purpose. She carried a small wooden plaque engraved with the words, "In honor of Nana and Buddy, for the love and guidance that never fade." Alex walked beside her carrying a hammer and nails. Buddy trotted ahead as though he already knew where they were going. When they reached the clearing, Emily chose a sturdy oak tree to mount the plaque. The process was simple but deeply meaningful, each strike of the hammer echoing through the quiet forest. As she stepped back to admire their work, Buddy sat beside her, his tail wagging gently. "It's perfect," Alex said, slipping an arm around her waist. Emily nodded, her eyes misty. "It's a reminder of everything they've given us, and everything we've built together." The story of Buddy and the wedding became a cherished memory, shared at family gatherings and retold to future generations. For Emily and Alex, it was more than just a tale. It was the foundation of the life they were building together. As they sat on their porch one evening, watching Buddy chase fireflies in the fading light, Emily leaned against Alex and sighed contentedly. "I don't know what I did to deserve him," she said softly. Alex kissed her temple. "You don't deserve him. You love him. And that's all he's ever needed." Years passed, and the story of Emily, Alex, and Buddy became a cherished piece of family lore. Life unfolded in beautiful, unpredictable ways. Emily and Alex grew together, their relationship strengthened by the honesty and vulnerability that had marked the start of their marriage. Buddy, now older and slower, remained at the heart of their family. His once vibrant golden coat had softened to a silvery hue, but his spirit was as bright as ever. One crisp autumn morning, Emily sat on the porch, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. The leaves painted the landscape in fiery reds and oranges, and the air carried the faint scent of wood smoke. Buddy lay at her feet, his head resting on her lap. "You've always loved this time of year, haven't you?" she said, scratching behind his ears. Buddy wagged his tail slowly, his amber eyes gazing out at the yard, where a swing swayed gently in the breeze. Alex joined her a moment later, a blanket draped over his arm. He wrapped it around her shoulders before sitting beside her, his gaze following hers. "He's had a good life," Alex said softly, glancing at Buddy. Emily nodded, her fingers running through Buddy's fur. "He's given us so much more than we could ever give him." That afternoon, Emily decided to revisit the clearing in the woods where Buddy had led her on her wedding day. She carried a bouquet of fresh flowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the muted tones of the forest. Buddy walked beside her, his pace slower than it used to be. He paused occasionally, sniffing the air or watching the squirrels darting through the trees. When they reached the clearing, Emily placed the flowers beneath the plaque they had mounted years ago. The words, now weathered but still legible, brought a lump to her throat. "In honor of Nana and Buddy, for the love and guidance that never fade." She sat on the ground beside Buddy, leaning against the sturdy oak tree. The memories of that day came flooding back. The letter, the locket, and the profound realization that had set her on the path she now walked. "You changed everything that day," she said, her voice trembling. "You reminded me to trust my heart, to believe in love, and to never stop listening to what really matters." Buddy rested his head on her knee, his eyes closing as if content in her presence. The years continued to pass, and eventually, Buddy's time came to an end. His final moments were spent in the warmth of Emily and Alex's embrace, his life celebrated with gratitude and love. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Alex found solace in the memories they had shared with him. They framed his picture alongside their wedding photo, the two images a testament to the bond that had defined their journey. Buddy's legacy extended far beyond their home. Inspired by his story, Emily and Alex began volunteering at a local animal shelter, sharing their time and resources to help other animals find the love and care they deserved. They also started a small foundation in Buddy's name, dedicated to rescuing and rehoming abandoned pets. The Foundation's motto, "Loyalty changes lives," became a beacon of hope for countless animals and families. One day, as Emily sorted through an old box of mementos, she came across the locket her grandmother had left her. She opened it, her fingers tracing the tiny photograph inside. She smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of nostalgia and warmth. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alex entered the room, his arms full of supplies for their next visit to the shelter. He noticed the locket in her hands and sat beside her. "You're thinking about them, aren't you?" he asked gently. Emily nodded. "I feel them with me every day. Nana, Buddy, they're the reason we've come this far." That evening, they walked through the woods together, hand in hand. The clearing had become a sacred space for them, a place of reflection and gratitude. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in shades of gold, Emily and Alex stood in silence. The plaque gleamed faintly in the fading light, a reminder of the love that had guided them through every chapter of their lives. The story of Buddy and the wedding became a cornerstone of their family's identity, passed down to their children and grandchildren. On quiet evenings, Emily would sit with her grandchildren, sharing the tale of the golden retriever who had changed everything. "And do you know what Buddy taught me?" she would ask, her voice full of warmth. The children would lean in, their eyes wide with curiosity. "He taught me that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect days. It's about showing up every single day for the ones who matter most." In the end, Buddy's legacy was one of connection, between Emily and Alex, between their family and the community, and between every life he had touched. As Emily stood in the clearing one last time, now an elderly woman herself, she placed a fresh bouquet beneath the plaque and whispered, "Thank you, Buddy, for everything." The sun set, casting the forest in a warm, golden glow. And as the first stars appeared in the sky, Emily felt a familiar presence beside her, as if Buddy was still there guiding her one final time.